after the last few weeks, can you see the incentives of how people slide from the left to the right? This sort of denial by the Purity Party. The right is welcoming with open arms. Disaffected Democrats, please come here.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I do, actually. So if you're grounded in your values, and I do think I am, you're not going to be seduced by people who are just nice to you, right? Like, I actually really respect the fact that the right is welcoming, that they are willing to, forgive past transgressions and say, hey, we will take you in with open arms. Not everyone on the right, but generally speaking, that is what I noticed. Whereas with the left, there seems to be this weird obsession with exclusivity, purity, and purging people who are, heterodox or whatever.
Well, here we are with our favorite girl, Ana Kasparian. And here she is talking to somebody called Chris Williamson. Please forgive me, I have no idea who Chris Williamson is. I just saw that Ana Kasparian was being interviewed by him. So I thought that we would stop in and take a look. And again, she's talking about her leaving the left, is what it sounds like, and how she feels like right-wingers or people on the right are simply more welcoming. And she mentioned an interesting thing there about the left being obsessed with sort of purity tests and purging. And does that sound familiar? I don't know much history, but in the early days of communism in the Soviet Union, there were notorious purges. Somebody would come to power or try to establish a power base and then do a big purge. I believe Stalin was notorious for his purges, but probably others were too. Because, you gotta, purify. You gotta get only the good people. You gotta clean out the bad people, the people with the wrong think, the people who might have some wrong think. And of course, the people who might challenge your power. And yeah, that's a very, very leftist mindset, that whole thing, this purity testing. Oh, I thought you were an ally until you did this. Or I thought this, wow, it seemed like we were all on the same page together, but then you said something which doesn't fit within the narrative, my whole leftist narrative, and now we can't be friends. So in my experience, yeah, she's absolutely right. And let's face it, who would you want when the shit hits the fan, when things go wrong? Who do you want? You want somebody who's solid, conservative, reliable, and competent and capable. And let's face it, very few leftists are any of those things. Let's carry on with this conversation.
And so I've noticed quite a bit of that on the left, but I really do value who I am as a person, and I just don't think that I'm going to change my political views entirely based on who's mean to me or who's nice to me. But I will say this, I don't know if it's a strategy or if it's just who right-wingers happen to be, but their willingness to welcome people is honestly how you build power. It really is. And the left just fails to realize that. I don't know why they want to treat politics as if it's like this cutesy little exclusive club, but that's certainly how they treat it. But then there's also this paradox, because you look at the current Democratic Party, like Kamala Harris's campaign, for instance, and she's like luring in the who's who of Bush-era Republicans. And I don't like those folks. I don't like neocons. I think that, in fact, I became politicized when the neocons were in charge during the Bush administration. And the idea that I now have to just hold my nose and support Kamala Harris, even as she is talking about the value of having Dick Cheney endorse her and campaign with her, just like grosses me out. So it's like a weird paradox, because while I'm being trashed pretty viciously, there's like this insane support for what the Democratic Party is doing in bringing in never Trump Republicans. It's almost like Trump is at the center of everything,
It
right?
certainly feels that way, yeah.
Yeah. So it's like, if you're an enemy of Trump's, then you are welcome. Mm-hmm. But if you are someone who believes in a lot of left-wing policies, but you're critical in certain ways, well, you're not pure enough. We're going to purge you. We're going to purge you.
Where does that degree of purity come from?
I have no idea.
Have you tried to think about sort of what this mechanism is, this underlying dynamic?
It could be fear, right? Fear of betrayal. I think that, one thing that has really given me some clarity about what drives people is Jonathan Haidt's work when it comes to moral foundations. I love that book. I loved Coddling of the American Mind, too. That was an excellent book as well. But
I've seen Jonathan Haidt interviewed a few times. It's been a few years now, but he's got this, he expresses himself very well, and he does it in a very good way. It's in a way that doesn't get the hackles up of other people. So he seems like a very reasonable guy. I mean, to me, he seems like a reasonable guy. And he'll talk about things which would normally especially get like progressives and liberals very angry. But he manages to do it in a very, it's not that it's a clever way, it's just a very effective way. Like much better than I can do. I always get people angry when I talk to them about this stuff. So I'm glad she mentioned them. I'll have to check out these books. Let me know if you have read any of his books and what you think of them.
appreciated about that is I was able to learn about my own inherent biases. And also I was able to learn what, moral foundations the left has that leads to certain behaviors and certain beliefs. So the left tends to score very low on loyalty. And so that was really interesting. I took the test. I don't know how accurate it is, but I scored the absolute highest in loyalty. And so it's just, when I see members of the left publicly trashing each other, like prominent figures publicly trashing each other in bad faith specifically, it really disgusts me. It genuinely does. And even as all of these various public figures on the left are trashing me right now, I'm not going to do that on my show. Like, I haven't done that on TYT. I'm not going to do that on TYT because it's just, the whole thing grosses me out. It's just not who I am. So
Yeah, loyalty is critical. Certainly, men in general value loyalty very highly. And I would say I would call that a conservative trait for sure. Loyalty. Now, of course, immediately I'm going to get a bunch of hate from my liberal and progressive family and friends saying, well, we're loyal, and that's true. Of course it is. But I just think by definition, being conservative, our loyalty is by definition conservative. You're trying to maintain things the way they are and keep them that way because they work.
I think moral foundations might play a role in the different behaviors that you're seeing on the left and the right.
I understand what you mean about this fear, and especially the loyalty point, that I often think that if you know one of someone's opinions and from it you can accurately predict everything else that they believe, even though they might not genuinely believe it, you have this reliable model that kind of projects out where Anna, we don't need to worry about Anna, she was on board with X, Y, and Z last time. But if if you're this sort of perfect round sphere, we know that if we roll you where you're going to go. But if you've got a couple of little sort of chinks out of you and a couple of dents and divots, you go, well, hang on, she didn't quite agree with us so much on that. So she's like an unreliable ally moving forward. I'm not so sure that I actually do trust her on this thing. So rather than potentially put your faith in someone who is with you most of the time, but not all of the time, it's easier to just cast you out. But even though you said, you're not, your political allegiance doesn't lie with whoever is nicest to you, you can certainly see the dynamic of how people would feel put off by the left's distaste. It's all well and good saying, I don't go just where people want me, but it's very hard to stay somewhere where people don't want you.
That's 100% true. Yeah, I do think that the right is winning. I think there's a reason why, if you look at voter registration, for the first time, there are fewer registered Democrats in America compared to registered Republicans. But that's not because they're registering as Republicans. It's because they're no longer registering as Democrats and just they're independent voters.
Yeah, they're probably just disgusted by the whole turn that the Democratic Party and that liberals and leftists and progressives have taken over recent years. They're probably just absolutely revolted by it, as am I. And I've never been a Democrat, of course. So that's interesting. I didn't know that statistics she was mentioning, or that fact. that there are now more, in the United States, more registered Republicans than Democrats, and that therefore a lot of those Democrats must just be, they're not becoming Republicans per se, but they're becoming non-Democrats, i.e. independent. So that's a hopeful sign, but there's a long ways to go before the situation in the United States and Western Europe, or the Western world in general, is going to get better. Unfortunately, I think things are going to have to get worse before they get better, but that's fine. You know, things, the pendulum swings, and it has swung very far to the left in many ways. And it's going to have to swing back, and it's going to swing back with a vengeance, because we've let it get so far out to this wacky place we find ourselves in now. So let me know what you think about that. Please comment if you have anything interesting to say, or if you just want to say hi. And in the meantime, don't forget to subscribe. I know a lot of you are watching these videos and not subscribing, but please do. It really helps me grow the channel and continue making content for you. Oh, and like it too while you're at it.